One of the challenges with email is that it's the way standards were built on the internet. The way the internet was built is it was built organically across orgs without a specific governing body. Usually, these were just multiple nerds who were trying to develop, email and websites, and they would build something, and then as things didn't work or things needed to be improved, they'd come out with different versions of those standards. That's why we have HTML4 and HTML5. We're in the fifth generation of the hypertext transfer markup label language website format that all the websites are in, because as the years have gone on, we've wanted to be able to do more complex things. We didn't need to stream video and have all these active websites and have security concerns in the 90s when HTML first started getting used. But today in the 2020s, it's critical. And so these standards have evolved over time. Email flows over a protocol called SMTP, which is Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. And it has been around since probably the 80s. I haven't looked up when it was invented, but probably late 80s, early 90s. And it's been in use to do email. And it was not designed for a world where we had AI and phishing and threat actors. That was not really part of the consideration. It was designed for interoperability and be easy to use. And so it's a really simple protocol where you go and you set a couple commands to an SMTP server and say, hello, I'd like to send email through you. And it'll say, yes, I'll take it. Just send the email and it goes. And in my college courses in the 2000s, we'd do that. We'd play with those SMTP servers and we'd go ping them and we'd send something through and it would show up in your mailbox. It was that simple. But very quickly after email started to take off and became common, we started getting spam. Spam was the first problem, just bulk email, unwanted email, just volumes of email. And that's not really a concern we have as much these days. There's a lot of filters and we still get a lot of email, but there's a lot of rules around the big providers, whether it's Google or Microsoft, really start to have strict rules that if you're not sending bulk email carefully, they're just going to block it. So that's kind of a thing that they had to build out some technologies around. And some of what we're going to talk to today applies to that. But spam filtering is not a big issue that customers come to us as much around. The bigger issue these days is, of course, security. We all read about phishing, business email compromise. And the real issue becomes, how do I know that the email I'm receiving is legitimate and real and trustworthy? And how do the people I send email to know that the email I'm sending is the same, that it's from me, that it's validated, that it's safe to trust? And that becomes a bigger and bigger issue as corporations have to send from multiple services. Maybe you've got a marketing system like Constant Contact, you've got your Office 365, maybe your accounting or billing system is sending emails. So your customers need to be able to say, I can trust email from these three services from these people, but if a threat actor in, Northern Africa decides to send email as my business, I don't want that to be accepted because that's not me. That's not my legitimate email. And so obviously there's a lot of capabilities that have been built up over the years around these email filtering products. And, we're a big Microsoft shop. So we really are big believers in the Microsoft Defender for Office 365 product. Now, I want to bring up a topic before I move on to my next section about third-party email filters. When viruses and spam and those sorts of things first became a thing, we were still running Exchange servers online back in the small business server days of the mid 2000s. Everybody had an Exchange server running under a desk or in a closet in their office, and phishing and spam especially phishing was less of an issue, but spam and viruses were a big deal. And so there popped up this whole industry of email filtering solutions, Proofpoint, Mimecast, MX Logic, all these big brands that were around that you could run through all your email through. And it was a critical thing. You had to have this in place because the volume of spam was just staggering. And so those tools got kind of created in the mid 2000s, and a lot of businesses still run them. And I think there's a lot of value in having a third party looking at your email that's not Microsoft, maybe get a different set of filters. But I do want to talk about an issue we're having, which is one of the downsides of some of those tools is they want you to route your mail through their servers because they filter it as it comes in. And in the past, that was kind of not a big deal. In fact, there was value of doing that in the 2000s in case your internet went down at your office and your Exchange server couldn't receive email, the mail filter could pool and spool up that email for you. But as we've gotten into this future where really trying to validate whether email is legit and trustworthy, having an extra step in the mail flow actually starts to break a lot of the technologies that are getting built to validate email, because that proof point server or whatever the server is you're running it through, the third party server, they're opening and looking at that email and then sending it to Microsoft. So when Microsoft gets the email, it's been opened, it may have been modified with a disclaimer or a footnote, and it also is coming from an email, an IP address and a mail server that's not the original sender. So it really messes up a lot of the signal data. We really like the Microsoft product, the Defender for 365, and think that's just a bare minimum. Even if you are using a third party, you want Defender for 365. But if you really want to run a third party solution, we're really big fans of moving to an API based third party solution. And a lot of the solutions that traditionally wanted you to route your mail through them now have an option of using it over the API. And it really makes a big difference, because what it means is that the mail is going straight to Microsoft, which means Microsoft gets all the data points about the validity of that email. It's unmodified. And then your third-party solution can use an API to see that email and can do the things it would have done just through an API through Microsoft. And that's a very common model now. And we really encourage people to go after that. It's causing a lot of consistent issues for people as they route their mail through other servers. And as we get into a lot of the technologies here that we're going to talk about today, it really breaks what people are building. And what's happening is that as email has become more and more of a thing where people are pretending to be other people and they're spoofing email addresses and they're compromising mailboxes and they're sending email as people, there's been a lot of effort put into bolting on some technologies on top of SMTP that validate email. First started with saying, hey, I will only accept email over an encrypted connection. That's a very common thing now where, your email, if it comes non-encrypted, the connection, the sending connection is non-encrypted. That's a big problem for most mail servers. They're going to really see that as a real threat indicator. Then it started with what's called SPF record, which is your sender policy framework. And an SPF record is how we go validate that these are the services that are allowed to send as us. So I'm sending as Office 365, and I also have a MailChimp account for marketing, and I have a billing account that sends billing invoices. You put those data points in your SPF record, and receiving email servers now are more confident if they receive email from those three services. And then we added what's called DKIM, which is domain keys identifier. I forget what the acronym stands for, but what it really means is that the email is signed. When it's sent, they cryptographically sign the email and put that signature in the email. And when the receiving server gets that email, they can go check the body of the email, check all kinds of variables, and compare it to the signature. And if it matches cryptographically, then it's validating that it's legitimate and trustworthy email. It's another data point. Then you bolt on top of that a technology called DMARC. DMARC then becomes kind of the authority behind SPF and DKIM. And it basically says, hey, I've got my DKIM and SPF pretty well dialed in. If an email's failing those, do not trust it, delete it. If it came from me, I guarantee that it'll have SPF and DKIM. And so it's a way to really validate your email going outbound. And so that's where a lot of our conversation is going to be in the next few weeks, is the validation side is where a lot of new technologies is coming out. And as you implement those on your system, it really helps your company not really stand out and make sure that the email you're sending gets delivered properly. As you add more and more of these technologies to validate your email, then the recipients can really trust that mail from you is trustworthy, and it makes sure your email gets through. And as we raise this standard of email validation across the industry, then the filters are able to start to lock down what they trust. And we're already starting to see that where I'll show you an article here in a second, but where Microsoft and Google, I think it's this article here, Microsoft, Google, and Yahoo are starting to put really strong restrictions on any senders that they see as a bulk sender, a sender sending more than 5,000 emails a day, sending to Yahoo, Google, or Outlook. If they don't pass DMARC and are aligned with SPF and DKIM, they're not going to accept it. They also want a unsubscribe link in the email, and they want to handle bounces properly. There's a few other very technical backend things. And if your company sends out a lot of email, it's worth spending some time on this, and we'll go deeper into how we can help with this. But the reality is, you as a business, if you don't have DMARC and DKIM in place, it's a real problem for your business.